Well, congratulations, you found the Integrity links. So Integrity is kind of cool because it's online real-time lecture capture, and the way we're going to do it is you can already see a bunch of the links. We're going to use it as reviews. Not the entire lecture, but all the key stuff kind of reviewed. And if you haven't played with Integrity yet, it's fairly new to our campus. Integrity, if you have an iPhone or an iPad or iPod, you can even download it. You can even get MP3, but it's going to exist in MP3 as an MP3 file, which is more of a podcast. Or you can just hang out on any computer and access them from anywhere since it's web-based. So we began our lecture in class, once we finished with all the first day of class stuff, with the difference between anatomy and physiology. Remember, anatomy is all about structures and how the structures fit together and relate together and the functions of the structures, and it really pertains to memorizing facts. Physiology is much more about function, how everything functions and is regulated and starts and stops and interacts, how all the different organ systems interact. And it's really more about understanding. Anatomy is lab, physiology is lecture, and you have to approach the two with different study techniques. So there's different types of anatomy. There's macroscopic and microscopic. Macro means big, so it's anything you see with your naked eye. Regional is literally that, regions of the body. In lecture, we're going to be talking about a lot of specific kinds of regional. But, someone who's an ENT, ear, nose, throat, that would be a regional. Systemic pertains to organ system. So those are cardiologists, urologists, nephrologists. Okay. And then you have surface. That would be a dermatologist, someone who studies the skin. Microscopic needs a microscope because micro means small. You cannot see these anatomies with your naked eye. Cytology is the study of cells, and histology is the study of tissues. There are other anatomies too, just be familiar with them. Embryology is all about fertilization to birth. Okay? Developmental is all about birth to growing up. And so we're going to have this underlying theme throughout the entire semester. And the theme is structure and function. If something has a certain shape, it does a certain job. And because of its job, it must have a certain shape. These are tied together in the world of A&P. You cannot avoid it, and you will get asked questions that test your ability to understand how these two things are related. In lecture, I'll click that link. That link takes you to a YouTube video that's just a cool animation of structure and function, and it's just for fun. Right, the next thing we look at is how living things are organized. Okay, and your textbook divides it into a chemical level, get my pointer, a chemical level, a cellular level, an organ level, and an organ systems or organismal level. Chemical level is atoms to molecules. So, we humans and all living things, if you break them down to the most simplest, we are basically atoms and molecules. That makes our chemistry professors on campus very excited to hear biologists say that. If you get different atoms together to perform a functional unit, that's a molecule. If I get different molecules together performing so that they are a functional unit, those are organelles. Can you name organelles? If I get different organelles together performing so that they are a common functional unit, that is a cell. The cell is the moment in which you have life. If I get different cells together performing common function, that is a tissue. And there's 4 categories of tissues in the human body. If I get 2 or more tissue types performing common function, that is an organ. Organs are things that tend to surprise people. 1 muscle is an organ. 1 bone is an organ. 1 blood vessel is an organ. If I get different organs together performing common function, that's an organ system. And if I get different organ systems performing common function, that's an organism. So that's called the hierarchy of living things. It's how we are organized. In this class, we are going to start with organelles, then do cells, then do tissues, and then do some organs by looking at organ systems. All right, the other thing biologists love to do is talk about what life is. How do you know that you're alive but the chair is not alive? And so we're going to expand on that in this class and add a few more things. Living things metabolize. Metabolism is all about chemistry. Here's a couple of pathways right there. Metabolism is the chemistry of taking a nutrient molecule and getting energy out of it, or taking small monomers and building them up into a big molecule. Responsiveness is how does that cell or that organism respond to a stimulus. You know, if you put a chocolate chip cookie in front of me, chances are I'm going for it. If you put broccoli in front of me, I'll go for that too. I actually like vegetables. Okay. You know, some living things will move toward light or away from light. So how you respond to a stimulus is responsiveness. Living things respond to stimuli. Living things move, obviously. Little guy right in there. And movement, you know, with us, it's obvious. But movement can also be inside a cell. Okay? You know, bacteria that don't swim move because the cytoplasm inside of them does. And then we have growth. Growth is two ways. You can increase in the number of cells and get bigger and bigger. Or you can take one cell and have it get bigger. So growth, you know, takes on a couple of different meanings in the world of biology. But growth tends to be more self-explanatory. Living things also do differentiation, which means parts of the body become specialized. Even if I take one bacterial cell that's pretty simple in quotation marks, bacteria are organized. They have regions where they put their nuclei, or not their nuclei, regions where they put their DNA, regions where they put carbohydrates, other regions they'll put lipids in. So they are actually kind of compartmentalized. By the time you get up to an animal, now you've got, you know, heads, limbs, thorax, things like that. Living things can make other living things. That's reproduction. And the biggie, living things do homeostasis. Homeostasis is the ability to maintain. Well, let me start over. You learned in maybe general biology, you definitely learned in high school. Homeostasis means steady state or same state. But in reality, in the 200 level of biology, here's what it means. The ability to maintain a relatively constant internal environment with respect to changes in the external environment. Homeostasis means the ability to keep the inside about the same even though the outside is changing. So you learned in about the third grade, you just forgot, that the cell is the basic functional unit of a living thing. The cell is the point at which we have life. Cells are limited on their size because of surface area limitations. The bigger a cell gets, the bigger its volume, and the smaller its surface area. So there is a size limitation. Cells can also become highly, highly specialized. A cell that is a neuron in your brain is as different as you can possibly imagine from a liver cell. Now, cells deal with environments, okay? And the environments are basically inside versus outside. Outside is extracellular, inside is intracellular. Between cells is interstitial. So there's fluids in those environments and solutes in those environments. But you have to keep these words different from each other, especially these two. So we're going to do a rapid fire preview of organ systems. Remember, integrity lectures are meant to be a review, not a substitution for lecture. Integumentary system, that's your skin, that's your covering. It protects your body, it can synthesize vitamin D. It produces sweat for temperature regulation. It has oil glands to keep the skin kind of waterproof and supple. And it has a lot of sensory neurons in it for sensory information. Your skeletal system is all about protection of vital organs, internal support, movement, storing minerals like calcium, and forming blood cells in the marrow. The muscular system is for movement, and by movement we are able to manipulate our environment. We maintain posture, we can produce heat, and we can create facial expressions for communication. Our nervous system is control. We control every process in our body. We can respond to changes in the environment. We can integrate and learn information. We can perceive senses and things about our environment. The endocrine system is about hormone production. Hormones regulate growth, reproduction, metabolism, your stress response, and your circadian rhythm, which is day-night cycle. Your cardiovascular system is all about transport and exchange. Your lymphatic and immune system is your other circulatory system, in quotation marks. It returns the fluid that leaks out of your cells. It disposes of debris. It houses white blood cells for your immune response. Your respiratory system is all about gas exchange and pH regulation. Your digestive system is the ingestion, propulsion, digestion, absorption, and elimination of molecules. Your urinary system allows you to eliminate waste, and because it deals with water, it's all about balance, acid-base balance, ion or electrolyte balance, and water balance. And obviously, the reproductive system's function is to make more humans. And so right off the bat, we want you to understand that everything is connected to everything else. Every organ system in the body is connected to and communicates with every other organ system in the body. There are two master organ systems, the nervous and the endocrine, that help us maintain this communication and organization. So this slide I'm going to go over more in lecture. It's an example of how different organ systems can come together. Feel free to pause it and read through it if you're not very comfortable with this integration of different organ systems. Alright, so now we come to homeostasis. Homeostasis requires this integration, and there's, again, two organ systems that are the master organ systems for homeostasis, but every organ system has the ability to adapt to changes so that we can keep homeostasis. The nervous system is rapid, fast. That's your brain and your nerves. And the amount of time it takes to think about it, you've already done it. Okay? Imagine touching a hot pan and pulling your hand away. How fast does that take? In that moment in time when you pulled your hand away and said, ow, you had to transmit information from your fingertips all the way up your arm to your spinal cord, up to your brain. Think about it, process it, figure out what to do, and then send information from your brain, down your brainstem, down your spinal cord, out your shoulder, out your arm to the muscles and have them respond. And it took no time at all. Because it's rapid detection and rapid response, it's also effects are shorter term. They're quick. Endocrine system is almost the opposite. Doesn't mean it's bad, doesn't mean it's not as good, it's just different. It's slower detection and much slower response, but its effects are longer term. The endocrine system is all about hormones. And so all homeostatic systems in the body have the following parts to them. They all have a stimulus, which is a change in some variable. It got hot. You touched something hot. You poked yourself. You got hungry. Your glucose level dropped. Your glucose level rose. Any change. That stimulus is detected by a receptor, which sends information along an afferent pathway to a control center, which thinks about it, decides what to do, decides how to solve the problem. Sends that information out along an efferent pathway to an effector for a response. Every single system does this. And you have thousands of homeostatic systems. Well, even though they all do this, there's two different ways to go about it. Negative versus positive feedback for homeostasis. Negative feedback is by far more common, and the response of negative feedback turns off the pathway. You can think of it as an increase leads to a decrease, or decrease leads to an increase. I'm going to go through two examples in detail in lecture, and that's going to be glucose and temperature. So again, this is a review, not a substitution. Positive feedback is the opposite. It's far less common. And because of positive feedback, its response gives even more response. So, you know, something happens and you get a little bit. Which triggers more? Which triggers more? Which triggers more? Which triggers more? So an increase more or less leads to an increase. Positive feedback gives you more and more and more. Negative feedback gives you more, then it stops. And then it gives you less, then it stops. Okay? So negative feedback goes up and down. Positive feedback goes up and up and up. So if you were to graph them, this would be negative feedback. This would be positive feedback. Okay? Positive feedback can get out of control. In lecture, I'll specifically mention estrogen as a hormone in females, blood clotting, and this thing called oxytocin in labor. So in class, I will play this. It's a song, excuse me. It's Homeostasis set to music. I didn't write it. The lady down there wrote it, and we'll just spend a couple of minutes listening to it, and everyone will laugh because I will sing. All right. Your book makes the point that when you have an imbalance in homeostasis, that predisposes the body to pathology, disease, and that's true. So in class, we'll talk about diabetes and how that increases risk of disease and different pathologies. We'll talk about DNA mutation, free radicals, and how that's related to aging. We'll talk about what happens when positive feedback in the body happens when it shouldn't happen, and how that results in clots and heart attack. So homeostasis becomes this huge, huge concept. And in fact, everything you do in your body is an attempt to maintain homeostasis. So at the end of the first lecture, and reading the first lecture notes in the first chapter, you should understand and define the terms we went over. You should know the hierarchy and how life is organized. You should know the characteristics of living things. You should be able to list and describe the functions of all those organ systems. You should be able to describe homeostasis and not steady state, the real Bio 2050 definition. You should know all those components of a homeostatic control system. And you should be able to differentiate positive and negative feedback with examples. So that was this review. The other reviews won't be so quick because this beginning of class is pretty short. But after every lecture, after every chapter, we'll do a review like this with PowerPoints, with animations sometimes. And you'll see you already have a lot of them there. So I only have a couple more to add before I have a complete set.